Okay, people. So I am happy to be joined by Adam Seidel, the writer of the Warm Season. Yes, we looked at the Warm Season the other day, and now we got Adam to talk about everything about that film. Adam, thank you for joining me, man. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
man, it's an honor to be here.
Hey, no, I just appreciate you checking out the review and being down for jumping on, man.
Mhm.
So you're a playwright, right? And
Yeah.
if I'm right, this is your first film script.
Yeah, well, I've written, maybe, like, 5 or 6 screenplays at this point. This is the first one that's been produced, which
Right.
is, freaking dope. But yeah, so the past, God, I guess it's been, like, 12, 13 years at this point, which is kinda terrifying. I've been a playwright, and, I've had stuff, like, done in New York, stuff done in LA, and that's been like super awesome. I was, it was like 2019, and I was living in New York, and obviously like the pandemic came, and my wife and I, coincidentally, before all hell broke loose, we made the decision to move back to Wisconsin, which is where we're both from. And we already had like a daughter who at the time was 2, and now we have a son, and he was like cooking in the oven. So we were like, oh shit, we gotta like figure out our life. And we went back to Wisconsin, and the theater world kind of fell apart in
Mm,
globally, really. And my career was sort of like getting some heat, and that kind of fell apart globally. So I was like, "Oh shit, what am I gonna do now?" And I had these screenplays. I think at that point I had like 3 screenplays that I had just written because I wanted to write one, and one of them was the Warm Season, and it was in a much different form at the time. It was a thing I'd written maybe 7. No, I'd written it like 6 years prior to, just putting it on the shelf and being like, I just lost interest. I didn't know what to do with it. So, you just sort of put something away.
mm.
So pandemic, I'm sitting there on my computer being like, what am I going to do? And I saw, the file for it. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll just read it for the hell of it. And I was like, oh shit, I think there is something here. I just necessarily didn't know how to do it 6 years ago when I was still kind of like learning how to write. But there's definitely some balls here, and let's dive back in. And that was kind of the start of it. And here we are now talking about it. Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah,
Interesting. Now, before we get to the film, there's a
yeah,
few questions, right? So, firstly, you become a playwright now because there's a lot of times people do something but the intention is to get to somewhere else.
yeah.
So was the playwriting the thing? Was that like, what I mean? If there was no pandemic, you'd still be doing playwriting.
I think so. I mean, it was so I got into playwriting when I was living in Chicago, and this is like I guess 15 years ago at this point. I was living in Chicago, and there's this thing, Second City,
Mm,
uh, which is kind of like a feeder for Saturday Night Live, and it's like comedy, sketch comedy. And I saw a friend's show that he wrote there, and I'm sitting in the audience. At the time I was a critic for hip hop. I was a hip hop, I went to like live shows in Chicago.
cool.
There's
We
tons of
will revisit that. We
okay,
definitely gonna
yeah,
revisit that, my friend.
yeah, because I'm like a huge, not as I mean, now I'm like a 40 something dad, so I've kind of lost my razor edge. But yeah, I was like huge into the hip hop scene, and covering it in Chicago. But anyway, so I was doing that, and I went to this show at Second City, and I saw my buddy's show, and I saw these jokes that characters were saying, like hitting, and the audience just loving it, and it just like slapped me across the face, and I was like, fuck, this is what I have to do. So I sort of like dropped everything I was doing with journalism and went through the writing program at Second City, and that turned sketch comedy turned into one act plays, turned into full length plays. And it's like one of those things in life you can't really quantify or explain why you do something. There's just some bizarre like fuse inside of you that just like ignites when a certain thing hits you. And so yeah, so plays are the thing. I love writing plays. I love how theater is, like a live shared experience with an
Mm.
audience. I mean, a bad play can also be just like horrific, but that can be almost as fun as a good play. Uh, but yeah, so I would like to get back to that as well. But yeah, right now, I mean, screenplays are cool, so I'm into it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Now, with a play,
yeah,
right? Because I've seen, oh man, I've seen a lot of different plays on a lot of different size stages.
hmm,
So is that something that you have to consider when writing? Because I went to the National Theatre and saw Small Island, and
hmm,
the way they handled the transitions was incredible.
hmm.
But then I saw Ocean at the End of the Street. Is it Ocean at
Mm,
the Neil Gaiman book that got adapted? So
okay.
and that was gosh, I want to say the Lyric Theatre, but might be wrong. But it
Mm,
was the stage was so small.
hmm,
But then the way they handled the movement and transitions in that was just, man, it blew your mind,
hmm,
right? So
hmm,
I'm always wondered as a writer,
hmm.
when you're writing something like that, do you think to yourself, okay, right, I'm thinking about movement, transitions. So this would be the type of stage this should be on, or are you just writing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the piece, and I maybe it's different for everyone, but for me, sometimes I'm almost like transcribing something I'm seeing in my head. So, and when I'm writing a play, I am like seeing it as a play. So I'm seeing it on a stage. And
Mm,
yeah, sometimes you're like, this is like taking place on an alley, like a bare alley, where it's just characters looking at each other.
yeah.
Or you're like, this is taking place, on a thrust. And I see it as, you know, 3 or 4 sets, but it's on like a table.
Mm,
So, you're like, "Oh," and then you kinda justify in your head, that's how I can be like, "Oh, yeah, that's why I have like 15 scenes in 15 different places." And, that's like the $5 million production that will never get produced. But, it's like, you go to like Roundabout Theater in New York and you see like, you see that insane production where it's that writer who's earned the right to have a production where they can say, okay, we go from a barbershop to a bus station to a cemetery. And,
mm,
the scenic designer just like pulls that off. Um, so I don't know. I think like in your head, you just kind of have to like go with it and not be afraid to be like, no, it can't be that because it will never be produced. So I can only write things that are like in one setting. I mean, it's kind of like a balance between being realistic and dreaming,
mm,
and I do find when I start to get in my own head about like, well, no, you can't write this because it's too extravagant or because of this or because of that, then that actually just hurts the story. And then the story never gets born in the first place,
mm.
you know?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And did the advent of technology change the approach? Being able to kind of backlight and project, and now you've got green screen and new kind of different things to make creating more settings
Hmm.
a little bit easier. Did that then impact the writing experience at all?
I mean, I think for some people, for sure, because it's just more of like that thing of saying, if you can dream it up, we can execute it. Whereas before, with like Noel Coward and Eugene O'Neill, like they didn't necessarily have that, but I don't think that necessarily held them back either. I
Mm,
just saw a play. I was back in New York for some stuff actually with the film, and it was Cynthia Mace who plays the mom, Carlene. She was in. Oh gosh, what was it? It's this theater company that produces like, rarely produced plays by famous writers. and it
Oh,
was
okay.
Noel Coward's. Gosh, I forget the name of it, which is so silly, but the Rat Trap. Rat Trap.
Right.
It was like the first play he ever wrote, and the thing like has so many different settings, you know. And what he wrote that thing in what, the 20s, I want to say. I
It's a
mean, he
long
was like
time ago.
18 or something, and so he wrote this like crazy play with like all these different settings. So hey, if it didn't stop Noel then, why should it stop anyone now?
Yeah. I mean that's really true, because I think sometimes the fear and expectation kind of cripples you.
Yeah.
And instead of the amount of times, I've been to a few comic conventions, right? And
Hmm.
just the question that always gets asked, like, oh, I want to write Daredevil. How do I get my script published?
Mm.
Right. And it's just like, oh, how can I get hired by Marvel? How can DC find me? And like, no one asking those questions, when asked, they've never gone, I'm just going to make something. I'm going to create my own character. I'll self publish.
Hmm.
Right. I'll
Hmm.
create something to show how good I am. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I'm not gonna let the confines that I see hold me back. I'm just gonna do until I'm undeniable. And I think that's the thing that sometimes stops us from actually going, you know what? I've got these ideas. I'm gonna do
Yeah, man.
something with them.
Yeah, I mean, dude, that's like totally it. And personally, that is a demon that I am constantly fighting back within myself of, just being like, screw it. Like what is the fear of, you got to conquer the fear that prevents you from like trying in the first place.
Mm,
And if it sucks, it's like you can hang your hat on the fact that you tried,
yeah.
you
Well,
know?
that's the thing. And I think if you put everything you have into the thing, even if it doesn't succeed, at least you gave it your all. You know what I
That's
mean?
it.
But it's if you half-ass something and it fails, because that's always the thing, right? You don't put everything in, so then if it fails, it's like, well, I wasn't really doing my best. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
this and it's just like, yo, but you kind of set yourself up to fail.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, not to be crass about it, but sometimes I say, and I forget, I'm totally taking this from someone else, but sometimes you got to put your nuts on the chopping block. And that's not even
Mhm.
just in writing, that's just like in life. And
Oh, for sure.
you're just never going to get anything out of anything if you don't just like wager it all and go for it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've got a wife and 2 kids, so I'm sure there was that trepidation, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
When
man.
before when you're dating her and then you're just like, "Oh, I want this girl to be my wife." Ah,
Yes. Yep.
and what I mean? Like, I get because I imagine you have a thought, I think she'll say yes, but you can never fully be sure. You could like I did it last year, and you
Mm.
as you're asking the question, right? That
Yep.
you're thinking this is a long pause. It might not even be a long pause, but in your head you're like, this is taking too long. Wait, did I
Yep.
get this wrong? Is
Yep.
this what's happening right now?
Yep. 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 Dude. Yes. It's yeah, and then that takes you on a whole nother trajectory. Once she does say yes, and it adds a whole new bag of steaks into your life that you
Mm,
that you didn't think would be there, but it's great. It just adds mindfulness.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure, man.
Yeah,
For
man.
sure.
Yeah.
All right. So you've got these scripts sitting on the shelf,
Yeah.
and the warm season is the one you pulled down.
Yeah.
Why that one? Right? Why not either of the other two?
Mhm. Well, it was a story that always captivated me. I sort of dig these ideas of, uh, initially Clive was a guy. He was like a 40 something guy. And, he was kind of out in the middle. It was like originally in West Texas. New Mexico is very much like West Texas.
Mhm.
But, it's like one of these places you drive by where it's just like a single story 50 style road motel, and you're like, is it open? Is it not open? Like, are there like dead bodies in there? And it's like this dude is out there like trying to like make this place work, you know, and then it's like he like steps out his door and looks out at the desert. This was the original script, and what I had in my head and what drew me to it. And it's like there's like this broken parking lot, and then there's like a highway, a 2-lane highway that no one travels on except for maybe like 3 cars a day. And then on the other side of it, it's just desert, and then like mountains like 100 miles away. And that's like what that main character looks at every day. And somehow, despite that vast bleakness, still going, still trying to fix up this place, still has this like dream in his heart. And, so the landscape for me was very much, like more of the story than anything, because it's like what about that landscape speaks to that person, that all that physical hopelessness. I mean, I love the desert. I think the desert is a fantastic place. It's beautiful and mysterious, and it is really a hard place to live. When we filmed the movie, it was like absolutely brutal. It was like 110 degrees out in New Mexico. It was just crazy. But, it was just like what drew me to it is that this character is like in that place. And yes, he's from there, but what causes him to not only stay there, but to still try to persevere?
Mm,
And I guess maybe that just speaks to like, human nature. And yeah, I don't know. I think that's what I just kept coming back to. It's just such a evocative thing for me. I don't know.
okay.
Yeah.
And so, what led male Clive to become female Clive?
Well, I think for me, what led male Clive to become female Clive is that I think we've seen a lot of movies where there's a guy, where it's about a guy trying to do something. And, I don't think that's any less of a compelling story, but I think we've seen many stories of a man has a dream. A man is not going to give up.
Mm,
And then furthermore, Mitch originally was named Missy. And, Missy was sort of, very much like Mitch, and was like, what in the world is going on here? And I love you, but what are we doing out here? And, Carlene was still there. So, it was the same dynamic, but it was a more traditional approach to it that I think we've seen. And so when you turned it around and suddenly it's the woman who has this sort of dream that she can't quite you know, speak about for whatever reason. And then, now she has this husband who loves her and is supporting her while he's also doing his own thing. But he's like questioning, has my wife just straight up lost her mind? Like what, what's going on here? I think there was actually just more fuel to that.
mm. Yeah, I really liked that dynamic because a lot of times you'll have a film,
Hmm.
female lead, but she needs saving,
Mm.
right? And supposedly it's a strong female lead and all of this, but at
Hmm.
the end of the film, she still gets saved,
Hmm.
right? She still can never do the thing without, the husband, the boyfriend, the
Hmm.
friend.
Hmm.
And in this one, she owns the motel.
Hmm.
She's not necessarily financially dependent on Mitch,
Hmm.
so she
Yeah.
has all of these things of her own. And it's just like if Mitch stays or goes, doesn't really matter because
Yeah.
she's still got all the things that she had. And I
Yeah.
thought that was really, we don't always see that.
Yeah. Well, that was a thing. I'll let you in on a little discussion that, we had with that Janet and I had, the director who was fantastic. There was this debate, and it is originally in the script that Mitch comes back at the end. And then as we were making the film, it became apparent of why would Mitch come back? He's doing his thing and he's made his choice.
Mm,
And it's a film about choices. And he's decided to leave, she's decided to stay, and that's not necessarily a judgment on their love, but if we're going to tell a story about a woman who has made this decision, it felt that it sort of undercut it for him to
mm.
come back and now everything's like happily ever after. Because life isn't like that. I mean, you know, people don't just magically, reappear.
Mhm.
There is a lot of sadness and there is a lot of isolation and loneliness, but there's also a great amount of tranquility and peace that comes with knowing that you found your purpose and you're living your mission for better or worse. And so I think that was the right call.
Oh, man, because there was a moment and I'm like, "Okay, cool. Nah, don't I hope he doesn't turn up. I hope he because, a lot of times
That's
that's the
funny.
thing that happens, right? And he
Yeah.
turns up and then she's like, "Oh, I forgive you, Mitch. I love you." And he's like, "I
Yeah.
love you too, Clive." And then it's just like roll credits. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
first up, you felt that he'd already made up his mind to leave.
Yeah.
Even when the money, because at first it was just like, we're
Yeah.
not making any money. We need to rent out. No
Yeah.
one's renting. Then
Yeah.
the money comes, but he still wants to go. So it's just like, regardless of what, he
Yeah.
wanted to go.
Yeah.
And it's like, if he came back, why? Because, like, even though there is the love and all of that, I'd still feel a little bit let down.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? If I was
Yeah.
Clive. So it's just like, you don't want her to take him back if he
Yeah.
did come back. Or if they did get back together, it would be a long process.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was,
Yeah.
I liked the way that ended.
For sure, man. Because I mean, the movie's not really about love.
Mm,
I mean, it is about love. Maybe it's about, just love in the sense of being like at ease with where you're at and who you are. Um, but yeah, no, that was not the thing. So
yeah.
that's funny that you were on that wavelength too.
Well, yeah, I've for me, like what, because this is the thing, right? I look at so many different films, and sometimes you get the opportunity to talk to the creators behind the film, which is
Hmm.
great. And I always want to do that, but you don't always get that opportunity because you're watching something and you can think to yourself, hmm, I think it's about this, right?
Mm.
You might be, because I've heard people talk about stuff. I mean, I love going to art galleries because you have people, so sometimes you can tell they're on a date or something,
Mm.
right? Or someone trying to impress their friends, and they'll be like, no, what you can see the pain in this pit. See the brush strokes? Yeah, that's anxiety. And then you've heard the
Oh yeah.
the you know the artists talk about it, and they're like, yeah, it's just right. It's more a piece about love and a piece. And so the person is like, got it completely wrong, but they're
Yeah.
like, "Boom, this is." So you talk about films and stuff, and you think this is what I think it is, but you're not quite sure. But
Yeah.
I'm watching this, and it felt like it's this journey, right? And it's about accepting the different parts of that journey because she used to take photos and then she stopped. And it's like she stopped for these reasons, but she's hoping this thing, right? If she finds this thing, it's going to bring back that to her. And it's just like sometimes you just have to accept that you're going through this transition,
Yeah.
right? And then you make it to the next spot and then you birth that passion. And
Yeah.
that's what it felt to me. It was more about this journey and like accepting, okay, this isn't my savior, right? I just have to persevere and I do this and I get here. And then that's what it felt like. But you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
That's
Yeah.
it. I mean, yeah, it's funny because even when the things it screened in Milwaukee at the Milwaukee Film Fest, and I was there, and I did like a Q&A, and this woman, there were like a ton of people there, which was interesting at the Q&A because normally people try to like dip out. But
Hmm.
yeah, it was like 100+ people at this thing, and I'm just standing up there like, "Oh, hi guys." And anyway, so she asked this question. She's like, I saw the film like it was like The Wizard of Oz, and it was like Dorothy, trying to make her way back home. And is that what you intended? And that's not what I intended necessarily. Though maybe it is, but I was like, instead of really answering her, I was like, well, I just think that was like a really cool interpretation of what you saw. And I was like, I think that's the beauty of film, that everyone can see something different and take something different from it.
Mm,
And each interpretation is just as valuable as the next. And and I think that's really powerful, and I love it. And it doesn't even necessarily matter what me or Janet are trying to say. If that's not what's coming through to someone, but something else is, like, bravo, like, I love it. So
mm.
yeah,
Does it in like, well, I was gonna say infuriate, but maybe it's not infuriate, but it's just like I over the last few years, I've seen so many like websites when a film comes out, it'd be like the ending of Thingy explained, and
yeah,
you'll look at it and be like, what are they talking about?
yeah.
Right, again, like you might hear the creators talk about it, and they will say something completely, but these people are talking like they know, and they're like,
Oh yeah,
well,
man.
clearly when that happened they mean this, and you're just like,
Oh dude.
where did that come from? Like, what's happening, and why do we need
Yeah.
the ending explained to us all the
Right.
time?
Well, dude, so I don't know about you, but I'm like a huge Sopranos fan. I still think in my mind that's definitely one of my favorite shows still. And the ending of that is still just like talked about on YouTube. There are
Mm.
these YouTube channels, and I watched one the other day where they broke down the entire second part of the sixth season, and they're pointing to these little things and saying, this means this, and this means that. And you watch this for 25 minutes and you're like, oh my God, like I mean, maybe they're right. Maybe this is what it all means, but I'm like, maybe we could just sit back and not dissect it like it's a patient on a surgery table and just I don't know. It's real. That's so funny that you say that though.
Yeah, it just, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Like it baffles me. That's
Yeah.
why, because I'm like, you can talk about a film or a TV show, and if you liked it, the things you liked, the things you didn't quite connect with.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to tell everyone this is exactly what it meant,
Yeah.
I'm just like, but you do not know.
Yeah.
Like you have not got a clue. So what are we doing? It's
Sometimes
kind
the writer doesn't even know.
of
Things come out and they are what they are,
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. It's
Hmm.
but was that, the way this film ended, did
Mhm.
you kind of toy with any other, you know, end points of the film?
Yeah. Yeah. So the original script where it was male Clive, excuse me, I'm just getting over a little summer cold here. the the original ending was that Carlene passes on, and Missy or Mitch has left, and Clive is sitting there, not sure what to do, faced with the prospect of, and there wasn't money in the original, so it was just this man left with staring reality in the face, and he very lovingly performed a funeral pyre and set the place on fire and hopped in his pickup truck and drove down the road with it burning in the background. And
Mm.
that was like, and that was more of a metaphor of he was moving on.
Yeah.
And then there was kind of like this weird moment where there's this guy in this old broke down pickup truck with a Coke bottle bifocals, and pulls over on the side of the road and says, excuse me fella, I think your house is on fire. And Clive is just like, yep. And the guy just looks at Clive and says, okay, and just like continues on. And then Clive hops in his truck and goes the opposite direction, and roll credits. um,
Mm,
it's
okay.
a bit more like Coen Brothers,
Mm,
which I love the Coen Brothers. But I think that female Clive staying and sort of making peace with her environment in a new way was, for me, the more interesting, better choice. You know? Because when you
Yeah.
run from something, when you burn something and run away, you're actually like not necessarily solving anything because the problem's still there inside you.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the thing because she was there searching for this thing,
yeah,
and then she kind of had that rediscovery of photography and everything. So it just felt her staying is her now embracing and really birthing this new thing,
yeah,
right? And living, the dream, right? The creative place retreats, and so it just felt like, yeah, that's a nice way to kind of
yeah. And
put a
she
cap.
captures the coyote. Yep, exists with it. It's good.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
uh, okay.
yeah.
Now, how did you connect with Janet?
So I connected with Janet through one of the producers, Julie Crosby. I worked with her in New York. She actually produced my last play, Original Sound, in 2019. So we obviously became, and it doesn't always happen, but we became very friendly through that experience. You can either become very friendly or you don't want to talk to each other ever again. But we became dear friends from that. And so when the process of getting the film up and running was happening, reached out to Julie, and Julie was thrilled to get involved and rally troops. And um, we were looking for a director. There was a previous director, didn't work out for a plethora of reasons. And it was like, well, Julie, we need a director. So she had a wide network of connections in New York with female directors. I've always, I think I'd like to become a director too, but when I'm not directing, just writing stuff, I've always loved working with female directors. And I don't know if it's just because I feel you can learn more from a woman than from a guy. I don't know what it is, but I love female directors. So the objective was we need a great female director for this film. And she knew a whole bunch of people, shared the script, and she shared it with Janet, who she knew through this producing group. And Janet read it, and Julie's sort of like, okay, we'll probably never hear from her, but you just get it out there. And I think that Janet got in touch with Julie after like 2 days and was like, I'd like to talk some more.
Uh-huh.
And so yeah, it was kind of a surprising it was a surprising thing, and I was really grateful that she received the script like she did. And she's a fantastic writer as well, and just story person. She worked at New Line Cinema, I think, for like 10 or 11 years as like their VP of programming. I mean, it was like some crazy job. And so
Mm.
she like discovered all these people in the 90s. One of them was David Russell. And I don't know that she necessarily just, she might have discovered him. But, anyways, she got some of his films made and ended up marrying him. So she was definitely this, she has a good eye for talent, and she's
Yeah.
tremendously talented herself. So for her to like latch onto it and be like, I want this to be my next project was really humbling. It was awesome. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And did she have any, ideas around story? Like were any store like things changed with her,
Mhm.
coming on a project?
Well, every director has eyes on story and thoughts on story. And I've learned that through playwriting too. But yeah, I think she did. And like I said, she's got a keen sense of narrative, and she is a remarkable writer in her own right. So we worked on developing the script for about, I'm going to say, 4 months, 3 4 months. And the way that process worked was, she would come to me with questions. She'd be like, in this moment, um, I'm questioning the intentions of Clive. Like an example, like the fight in the kitchen when
Mm.
Mick wants to leave, and he wants to put Carlene in a home in West Alma, and he wants to go to Santa Fe. And it was like the original version of that scene. It was like maybe Mitch wasn't strong enough. Maybe Clive was a little bit too snarky. Um, it was just more about like identifying the emotional beats in
Mm,
every moment of the story. And so, when you're like knee deep in that development process, which happens with every single script, it's like as much as you wish something could just be like perfect, it never is. And part of the fun is, discovering and exploring. But um, yeah, I just think it's like, you think you're doing all this work and you're like, oh, it's like changing and it's different, but it's good. But then you look at the end process, the end product, as opposed to what you started with, and it's not necessarily all that different. You know,
mm.
the story is the same, the characters are the same. It's just about really diving into the connective tissue. And I don't know if that's a Janet term, the connective tissue, or if that's a just, industry wide thing, but it really is about going into connective tissue and seeing what's there and ensuring that, every emotional choice and moment is sound. And so I think we did that. And it made me a much better writer. And I am incredibly grateful to her for that tutelage.
Yeah, no, everything, like all those conversations and interactions, they felt honest,
Yeah.
right? It
Yeah.
felt real, because sometimes you'll watch things and you're just like, no one talks like that,
Yeah.
right? Is
Yeah.
that an example I always get used is like things like Dawson's Creek, right? Where everyone talks in these flowing soliloquies, and it's just like
Mhm.
no one, no one,
No one
no one.
talks.
And you like at that young age, you have some people who know some big words, right? And they
Yeah.
always try to, and some are using it the wrong way, or they're just not making any sense. So
Yeah.
having every single person talk the same way, it's just like, I'm not buying it, man.
Yeah.
That's and the arguments are silly. And you have these, in different films and stuff, you have the couples get into these arguments, and it's just like the argument feels like these people don't even know each other,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Or they haven't been together for 20 years, because they
Yeah.
are really destroying each other, and supposedly they're in this loving and I'm just like, if you're really in that you're not trying to completely destroy your partner like that, so it just feels weird.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
with this one, it just, yeah, I like the way everything flowed and these interactions, because you could see both people's sides of the argument.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool. That's awesome, dude. Kevin, I hate to say, my son is a little ill today, and he's in
Right.
the other room. I don't know if you can even hear him.
I
Um,
Yeah, I can hear a little bit in the
okay, I'm
back.
sorry. Yeah, I think parenthood calls.
Okay, man.
Um,
No worries.
but this was awesome, man. I
Yeah, no,
really
this has been great, man, and
okay.
we've been speaking for over 40 minutes, so
I
that's
know. Yeah, it's been great.
you know what I mean? I didn't even think it was that long, but
Could do it another 40 if my son wasn't losing his mind in the other room.
no worry. But
Yeah.
just before you go, let
Yeah.
people know where they can follow you and any place where the film might be screening next.
Oh, sure. Well, I think the film's going to be taken to market now. It's with Savant Artists, and so this guy Sebastian Tuardo is going to be shopping it. So hopefully, it'll be entering the streaming market soon. But otherwise, I'm on Instagram. I forget my handle because I just started it with the film. I think it's like Adam Sci or something.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
think
no,
it's
that's
a underscore
yeah,
something. It's like,
something rather.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, I'm sort of like not on social media at all. But yeah, but I hope this film hits the world soon, and I hope that that we get another one going soon.
Oh, that would be great, man.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
And when you do, definitely come by and have a conversation.
cool.
And yeah, maybe stop by another time and we can
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
rap, because we
Yeah,
didn't
we
get to
should,
that.
man.
And yeah, I
Sure.
really because
Yeah, man.
Common, Chicago, man. So you had loads
Yeah.
of cats coming out of that scene,
Yeah,
man.
man.
So,
Yeah, and I interviewed Wu-Tang Clan at the Metro
oh
Theater. I
shit.
mean, yeah, so
Oh,
I've got stories, so that could be part 2.
all right, man.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right,
Okay.
brother.
Thanks for stopping by, man.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
All
Okay,
right.
bye-bye.
Enjoy your day.
Yeah, yeah.
Bye.